Well, it's Cowboy Jim, Northern Alberta, Canada, up here in Fort McMurray, uh, where we don't give a rat's ass about what Ottawa thinks. We dedicate our lives in great part to honor God and those things in our lives that we hold as being important to us, each individual, whether Filipino or First Nations or Muslim people or Irish guys like myself. And I think that's good. When my ancestors left Ireland in 1857 and crossed on the coffin ships, they did so in order to seek freedom of religion, of speech, freedom to own a gun. Actually, uh, I went back to Ireland and I stood in my great granddad's cottage that he left in 1857, and I stood in the cottage with the wife of the day, and I looked at the cottage that my great granddad had built, and I had a better understanding of who and what I am from looking at where he lived. And then we drove down to the little shipping lane out into the whatever west side of Ireland, um, and and we I stood there and I studied the dock where the coffin ships used to leave from. I also drove by where the Titanic was built, and I realized the Titanic to me is emblematic of man's effort to do the spectacular, yes, but to do something so extraordinary. And unfortunately, some idiot said that the Titanic could never sink. Well, we, uh, we know the result of that. And I look at Alberta. I am a non-political person, kind of. And because my heart is directed to God, but I still feel very peaceful about having an opinion about politics. I mean, I do. I hear people in Alberta say separation is coming. Well, if it does, it won't be because Albertans have done anything wrong. If separation comes, it won't be because these cowboys out here, of which I'm not one. I am not a cowboy. Just a real good looking woman said one day, "You must be Cowboy Jim." I kind of looked at her for a second and I was going to tell her, "Woman, I'm no cowboy. I'm a retired rancher." And then I looked at her and I thought, "Woman, you can call me anything you want." um, but Alberta has a warrior like attitude. And you marauders in Ottawa, Liberals primarily, who wish to steal, control, limit, legislate all the rules that you can against Albertans. I have the greatest respect for First Nations Indians. Perhaps calling someone an Indian nowadays is politically incorrect. I don't know why. I mean, I was born in Canada, in Ontario, on the mouth of the Nottawasaga River and on Georgian Bay. But I was smart enough to move to Alberta back in 1978. And I have the deepest respect for First Nations people, also Métis. Also for Albertans. Indians, First Nations, Métis, Irish people, Albertans, we will not be pushed around. I have only met 2 Indians, First Nations people that I totally didn't like. And one was only 3 or 4 days ago at work. And I walked up to a big dude. Cree men tend to be big dudes. I said, "Brother, how are you doing?" And he looked at me with absolute, total, complete hatred that I hadn't seen since my first mother-in-law. She didn't like me. I took her daughter from Alberta, or from Ontario, and my 2 grandsons out here to Alberta so that my boys could grow up sitting on a horse and learning to become men rather than drug dealers, which was the prevalent trade back at Wasaga Beach, 60 miles north of Toronto. And I looked at that Indian first. Last time I'm using First Nations, okay, so suck it up and get over it. When I looked at that Indian man, I have never been able to get over a few movies that I've seen about the government schools. I remember clearly my second wife, gorgeous looking woman, great rear end, and beautiful beyond measure. And she was half Cree and half Hungarian, but she is a looker. And she experienced the horrors of the government schooling system. But there was a movie not too many years ago, something about a horse. And I watched that movie, and it was about a kid who knew how to play hockey like I know how to run equipment. It was just a gift, eh? And it delineated his experiences as an Indian in the government Catholic schools. And I tried watching that movie from the front to the back, couldn't. I believe it was nigh on to 6 times before I was able to get to the end. And my heart, my soul, my spirit was sickened. I am against abuse in every sense of the word, in every situation. But I grew up as a 5-year-old watching a Down syndrome, we used to call them mongoloid back then, friend of mine who was used and abused like First Nations. Oh, screw that. Like Indian people have been abused by government and the Catholic Church. Priests. Terrible. I know some good Catholic people. I know some good Christian people. I know some good Muslim people. But those people choose to demonstrate their goodness, their kindness, their consideration, their respect, all those things. But here in Canada, we have had a government that has weaponized law enforcement. I slept in my old Dodge, Coots, Montana. I left the same morning that the police brought a whole bunch of guns from a ranch 20 miles away. And it seemed like they were pretending on the news that those guns were seized at our, I was there, so I'm loosely connected with the Freedom Convoy. And we had an old-time revival at Coots, Montana, where we had a Sunday morning church service, a couple of hundred people. And anyone who lives in Airdrie, Paul's Pizza and Steakhouse sent us, I'm a truck driver, so I'm including myself in that, sent us 200 pizzas. Didn't charge a thing. And they sent them from Airdrie clean down to the Coots, Montana border. That is respect. I never go through Airdrie without stopping at Paul's Pizza to buy one of their huge pizzas. Oh, not like he sent down to the truckers at Coots, Montana. I mean, it would have bankrupted the restaurant because Paul's, well, they put so much food on their pizzas. Now I'm hungry. I listen most clearly not to the government-funded news channels, that's CBC, CTV. I don't listen to that crap. I listen to the podcasts. I listen to friends at work. I listen, and I listen. And I cannot believe that the conservatives didn't win. Can't. 10 years of the evil of Trudeau's intended limiting of Alberta in terms of our natural resources. Some Indian friends of mine are going to get pissed off here. But as an Albertan, those natural resources are ours as well. And I watch in Newfoundland. I had a dear friend, won't say his name. I haven't forgotten it. 10 years ago, when we were Trudeau was first getting elected, and I asked him. I said, "Are you voting?" He says, "Well, I have to." And I said, "Good, good." Because it was my opinion that no one in their right mind would vote in a Liberal. I said, who are you voting for? Like, he was out here in Fort Mac working. We were in camp. He said, I'm voting Liberal. I said, why would you do that? And he said, because I have to. I said, why? He said, because the only hope that the East Coast has is to have a Liberal government, because that Liberal government represents sustenance. That Liberal government bought the East Coast vote. Now, I listen to the news and all those things, and my heart is Scripture based. That doesn't mean that I can't have an opinion. I do have an opinion. But I cannot forget that movie in the North where a kid was taken away from his grandmother who died, and he was effectively raised by priests who did not honor God, but rather dishonored God by using and abusing children. I know that the Liberals have done everything in their power to make Indians dependent on the government. But I know some Indians, and they don't bend the knee easily to Ottawa. They're men, and they can be. I work for a company that is owned by a native guy, an Indian, and he built it. One day I wished I could meet him. I would thank him for the last 4 years' work. But Indians are in a tough place. You see, they believe that they own all the resources in Alberta. I wouldn't argue with them. But owning something and not developing it is not as good as owning something and developing it. And I will never forget the first Indian I ever saw. And he was walking. He and his family lived in the bush at Wasaga Beach in Ontario. And every day or second day, he would carry a lawn chair built of cedar, just inch and a half cedar poles, bended, and he would carry those down to the beach one at a time and sell to the tourist. And I watched him. And thank God I had a mother who was not racist at all. She was special. She loved God, but she did not disrespect Indians. And so I grew up with a real right attitude about Indians. because all through my life, I have met Indians, natives, who are like this one young man I saw limping down the side of the road. I used to live at the Olds overpass, and I was going into town, and this guy was hitchhiking. So I pulled over right now. Hey, I knew he was Indian, okay? And I pulled over right now, and he jumped up in my big Ford. I said, "How you doing today?" He said, "I'm good." I said, "I saw you limping." He says, "Well, I'm doing good." I said, "But I saw you limping." He said, "Well, yes." He said, "I had been in a car accident and was paralyzed about a year before, and his toes started to tighten in on themselves. And so he said, my toes wear through the bottom of my running shoes." I said, "What?" He said, "My toes wear through the bottom of my runners." He said, "Here, I'll show you." And he took his foot up so I could look at the bottom of that kid's shoes. His toes had no skin on them, just bloody meat. Smiled at him. I said, You're one tough dude." I said, "Do you know Olds at all?" He said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Where would you go if you were going to buy a new pair of runners?" Oh, he said, "I'd go to the sand store." He said, "They're cheap." We did. I said, "Pick out a pair of runners, and we've got to get you some socks." His feet were bleeding. And I look for character, okay? Character. That's earned character. It shows the person's heart. I said, "Okay, there are the runners all over there." I said, "You see those barrels of runners?" He said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Go grab yourself a pair, son. I'm paying." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes, sir." Character showed up when he went to the barrel of runners that were priced at $10. The next barrel, $15. The next barrel, $20. And he went straight to the $10 ones. He says, "Oh, I'd love these. These are." I said, "Son, I won't buy you those." I said, "Get over to that $15 barrel." You might say in your heart, "I was pretty cheap." I had $27 in my pocket until payday. 27. I bought him his $15 runners. I bought him a 3-pack of socks. And I said, "Put them on." He said, oh, these are too good to wear." I said, "Son, put them on, okay? Your runners, your socks, they're going in the garbage." And the lady at the till, she staring at me a bit. And I said, "You make sure these ones get in the garbage." And so I took the Indian kid. He was no more, he was a bit skinny. But I doubt that he was 18. Okay. We went outside and I looked across the street. And I said, "You see over there?" I said, "Where are you going?" Anyways, he says, "I'm hitchhiking out to the Sundry Hospital because they do therapy out there for me." And he says, "I've hitchhiked from Pinoca this morning, and I'm going to Sundry." I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. I said, you see that that restaurant across the road? This was about 8 o'clock in the morning, might have been 8:30. I said, here's another $7, and I know you can get good bacon and eggs over there and coffee. I said, you're going to promise me that you're going to get yourself a good breakfast? He said, yes, I will. I said, good. I said, God bless you. Y'all take care. I did without food that day. It didn't kill me, okay? But if you give, I hope it is not out of your surplus. I hope if you give, it's out of your heart condition, even if it gets a bit uncomfortable for you. Okay. That boy did not want charity. We Irish that came from Ireland, we didn't come for charity. This is Indian country, and their treaties won't be set aside. Ottawa is going to do everything in their power to cajole, convince Indian people how important Ottawa is, because Ottawa purchases votes. It's the way it is. I have not 1 degree of animus, anger, toward Indians. I don't. We share a country. I had a big friend, Big George, big dude. I won't say his last name. He said, Jim, I'd like to come down to your ranch and hunt elk. I said, well, we have lots of elk. I said, there's a herd about 425 hanging about the neighborhood. I said, how many are you going to get? He said, I'm going to shoot until my gun gets too hot. I said, well, brother, you're not doing that at my ranch. I said, we harvest meat. We don't wipe herds out. And it's just a difference of attitude. Not every Indian is like that. Many know the common sense of killing a cow moose means she's not going to have a baby come spring. Not. And so you end up killing your breeding herd, and that's not the way to do it. Okay, let's come back to this. The government of Canada wants to cripple Alberta and Albertans' ability to feed their children. The Canadian government wants also to cripple Indians in order to keep those Indians dependent upon the government. My Indian brothers, are you going to learn how to shoot with a bow and arrow again? Some of you probably do. I do. Because the government is going to take your guns. Because they have banned 1,500 different types of guns, long rifles, used for hunting. Model 94, Winchester, 30-30. It's not allowed anymore because that government, that liberal government in Ottawa, dictates what you and I can do. And that government is also going to do everything in their power to cause Indians, white people in Alberta, to be at odds with each other, to fight against each other. Because then the liberal government can step in and say, oh, we know better for you than you do. And they will strip away and denigrate and humiliate both Indians and Albertans in a very similar fashion to what they have already proven they intend to do. Government schools, limiting every natural resource in Alberta that could be developed to better enable Alberta to take care of Albertans. Think about that. Alberta's natural gift from the Creator, from my God, the God of the Bible, as far as I'm concerned, but I have some Indian friends that say just the Creator, okay, and their ancestors. Hey, you're right. But the government has fought against every development in Alberta that would cause Albertans to hold on to the billions and billions of dollars that are considered to be equalization payments. But the joke, Albertan people and Albertan companies like the one that I work for, Indian owns it. I'm glad he does. Hope he doesn't fire me. I'm serious. But those equalization payments are paid to Ontario and Quebec and BC, who happen to be the richest of the provinces right along with Alberta. And Albertans, they don't mind paying money to the East Coast. They don't mind any of that, but not to Ontario and Quebec and BC, because Ontario and Quebec decide who is governing all of Canada. We just want that to go away. We would rather have Albertans dictating who governs us. And that's not Donald Trump in the States. An independent Alberta voted in on a referendum, the government of which honoring Indians, Irish people too, okay? But normal people, well, some would say Irish aren't normal. Well, that's probably quite true. But we don't need to fight each other as Albertans to make it easier for the Liberals in government. And they're just the same as they have been for the last 10 years. And Carney says, oh, we're in for change. Okay. I am going to guard my tongue. Okay. The same Liberal elected people are in power now for another 4 years. Same people, same agenda, same controls, same overriding arrogance of a Liberal Party who says, we're going to take your guns away. My Indian brothers, that's your guns too. Okay? I shoot a crossbow. I won't go hungry. But am I angry that a government in their superiority, arrogance, dictates to Canadians what they can and cannot do? Yes, I am. Okay, so here. God made Satan in order to give you a choice between the God of the Bible, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, and or Satan. But God gave you a choice. That's why he did that. God has stated in his word that we have the quality of government that we deserve because we won't do anything about it. We won't vote. But also, our votes don't count out here in Alberta because of the voting premised on ridings premised on population. So this old cowboy is told what to do by people in the cities in Ontario and Quebec and dictated what we can and cannot do. And I say that's wrong. So here, God gave you a choice. Choose ye now whom you will serve. You choose God of the Bible or you don't. It's up to you. But if you want to be at peace, just say a simple prayer like this. God, forgive me. I don't ever want to be religious, but I want you to know that I know that Jesus, the Christ, suffered, bled, and died on the cross for my sins. I'm so sorry for having lived the way I have. Help me to be what you want me to be. God bless you. You all take care now. Up to you.